morning. Welcome to Northwest, a Unitarian Universalist congregation. My name is Bruce Fowler, and I will be your worship associate this morning, along with Diana Kohler. Today's service will be led by our interim minister, the Reverend Kevin DeBeck, and will reflect on ways that groups build trust with each other and ways to come back into covenant when trust gets broken. Jim Moyer and Laura Variust will share the story, It Feels Good to Be Yourself, a book about gender identity by Teresa Thorne. Music will be provided by the Northwest Singers Choir with Ken Hermanot and Alex Myers. Ben Gable is our Zoom host. If you are a visitor here and would like us to stay in touch with you, please fill out the visitor form you will see in the chat box. The chat feature has been disabled except for chatting directly with the tech host. If you are having problems with Zoom, use the chat function or raise hand function in Zoom. You are encouraged to add your pronouns on Zoom by clicking on the Participants button at the top of the Zoom window. Next, hover your mouse over your name in the participants list on the right side of the Zoom window and click on Rename.
Next week's service will be What It Means to Be a Modern Humanist by Reverend Kevin DeBeck. Our lifespan religious education class is starting on the 20th, that's today, the 20th of February. It's for parents and caregivers as sexuality educators. And the sessions, it's 12 sessions that run from 1 to 2:30. If you have any questions, you can contact Eva. Our next Board of Governors meeting is Thursday, March 10th at 7 o'clock, and it will be followed by banter with the board the following Sunday, the 13th at 11:30. We are planning to reopen for in-person worship services for people who have been fully vaccinated on March 6th. This is in keeping with our goal of keeping the most vulnerable among us safe, and we will continue to provide opportunities to participate online in outdoor activities. If you have a pastoral care need or know someone in the congregation who does, you can contact one of the pastoral care team members. They are Melanie Deeds, Bruce Fowler, Karen Queck, Eva Leventer, Mary Mueller, Amanda Spurrell, Zena Stewart, and David Young. If you need a ride or a meal, Amanda Spurrell has taken on responsibility for coordinating that with the pastoral care team and membership.
Hello, my name is Anel Eccleston, and I'm the Director of Care and Sustainability at the Student Advocacy Center. Student Advocacy Center believes education is a human right and every youth is worthy of a quality education. Every day, we work to help Michigan students, K through 12, get back in school, stay in school, and grow in spaces where they feel safe, loved, heard, and challenged. At the Student Advocacy Center, we are composed of social workers and teachers who are passionate for ensuring all students have the opportunity to be supported in completing school. We work collaboratively with underserved students and their families to stay in school, realize their rights to a quality public education, grow, and experience success. We have offices in Detroit, Ypsilanti, and Jackson. Did you know that every school day, more than 6 children are expelled from Michigan schools? Our school systems are in an educational crisis, where suspensions, expulsions, and school-based arrests are used far too often in Michigan schools. We are there for those families, even when no one else is. We have our Check and Connect program, which is an evidence-based 2-year mentoring program from the University of Minnesota. Our mentors develop long-term relationships with a focus on school engagement. We have our Education Advocacy program, where advocates are supporting students by averting expulsions, reducing suspensions, and ensuring students' rights are upheld. We also support Michigan families with our statewide helpline. Our mentors and advocates help a wide variety of students find success, including students with disabilities, youth in foster care or experiencing homelessness, students facing harsh school discipline, or students who may be court involved. And we really work with our families to create systems-level changes. We will continue to fight for the rights of all students, and we are excited that you are willing to invest in our children today. Thank you.
Our chalice lighting this morning comes from the Reverend Gordon McKeeman, and he says, "Deep calls into deep, joy calls unto joy, light calls unto light. Let the kindling of this flame rekindle us in the inner light of love, of peace, and of hope. And as one flame lights another, nor grows the less, we pledge ourselves to be bearers of the light wherever we are."
Our opening words, "To Remember Our Promises" by Reverend Sarah C. Stewart. Reverend Sarah grew up in this church, and she's the daughter of Zena and David Stewart. Bring who you are as you enter our church this morning. Bring your best self and your struggling self. Bring your mistakes and your triumphs. Bring your shortcomings and your recommitment to good. Bring yourself here and open your heart to beauty, to truth, to the door that is open to the presence of God. Here in this church, we are trying to walk together on the peaceable way, trying to hammer out division and hatred and all that separates one from another. We try, and we will fall short, but held in love, we try again. We come together this morning as a church to bow our heads in prayer, to raise our voices in song, to remember our promises and vow to live by them once again. Our choir anthem is "Show Us How to Love," arranged by Mark A. Miller.
It feels good to be yourself a book about gender identity by Teresa Thorne, illustrated by Noah Grigny. This is Ruthie. She's a transgender girl. That means when she was born, everyone thought she was a boy, until she grew a little older, old enough to tell everyone that she's actually a girl. Girl is Ruthie's gender identity.
This is Ruthie's brother, Xavier. Xavier is a cisgender boy. That means when Xavier was born, everyone thought he was a boy, and as he grew older, it turned out everyone was right. He is a boy. Boy is Xavier's gender identity.
There are so many different ways to be a boy or a girl, too many to fit in a book. But not everyone feels like either a boy or a girl. Non-binary is a helpful word that can describe a kid who doesn't feel exactly like a boy or a girl.
This is Ruthie's friend, Alex. Alex is both a boy and a girl. When Alex was born, everyone thought Alex was a girl, but Alex is both boy and girl. This is Alex's gender identity.
This is Alex's friend JJ. JJ is neither a boy nor a girl. Ever since JJ was little, they never felt exactly like a boy or a girl. They just felt like themselves. This is JJ's gender identity.
Alex and JJ are both non-binary. Just like there are many different ways to be a boy or a girl, there are many different ways to be non-binary. Too many to fit in a book. Some kids feel like girls. Some kids feel like boys. Some kids feel like a little bit of both, part boy, part girl. Some kids don't feel exactly like a boy or a girl. They feel neither. Some kids feel that their gender identity isn't always the same. It's often changing.
Even with all these possible ways to be, some kids don't feel any of the words they know are exactly right. There are a never-ending number of ways to be yourself in the world.
Whether you feel like a boy, a girl, both, or neither, or if you describe yourself another way, that is your gender identity. Your gender identity might not match what people thought you were when you were born. Oh, or it might not.
See, when you were born, you couldn't tell people who you were or how you felt. They looked at you and made a guess. Maybe they got it right, maybe they got it wrong. What a baby's body looks like when they're born can be a clue to what the baby's gender will be, but not always.
When people guess wrong, it's okay to let them know. Ruthie was 5 when she told her parents, "I know you think I'm a boy, but really I feel like a girl." Oops, Ruthie was a girl all along. They just didn't know it at first.
When people guess right, it's also okay to let them know. Xavier was 3.5 when he told his family, "I'm a boy, I like being a boy."
You might feel like a boy. You might feel like a girl. You might feel like both boy and girl, or like neither. You might feel like your gender changes from day to day or from year to year. You might feel that none of these words describes you perfectly. You might not be sure yet. Maybe you're still figuring it out.
Your feelings about your gender are real. Listen to your heart. No matter what your gender identity is, you are okay exactly the way you are, and you are loved. It feels good to be yourself, doesn't it?
And now we will sing hymn number 124, Be That Guide.
My reading this morning is from the book of Levitcus, which is either in the Hebrew Bible or in the Christian Old Testament, depending on which flavor you go with. And this is chapter 10, verses 1 through 11. And it states, Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, took their censers, put fire in them, and added incense. And they offered unauthorized fire before the Lord, contrary to their command. So fire came from the presence of the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. Moses then said to Aaron, "This is what the Lord spoke when he said, 'Among those who approach me, I will be proved holy. In the sight of all people, I will be honored.'" Aaron remained silent. Moses summoned Mishael and Elzaphan, son of Aaron's uncle Uzziel, and said to them, "Come here, carry your cousins outside the camp away from the front of the sanctuary." So they came and they carried him, still in their tunics, outside the camp as Moses had ordered. Then Moses said to Aaron and his sons, Eleazar and Ithamar, "Do not let your hair become unkempt, and do not tear your clothes, or you will die, and the Lord will be angry with the whole community. But your relatives, all the Israelites, may mourn for those the Lord has destroyed by fire. Do not leave the entrance of the tent of meeting, or you will die, because the Lord's anointing oil is on you." And so they did as Moses said. Then the Lord said to Aaron, "You and your sons are not to drink wine or other fermented drink whenever you go into the tent of meeting, or you will die. This is a lasting ordinance for the generations to come, so that you can distinguish between the holy and the common, between the unclean and the clean, so you can teach the Israelites all the decrees the Lord has given them through Moses." Our next hymn is number 1023, Building Bridges. Think back to a time when you know you did harm to someone, be it physical or emotional. What did you do to fix the situation, or didn't do? In contemplating how to talk to you all about this today, I thought about how we learn to make reparations for our wrongdoings. When I was 7 or 8 years old, there was a time when I was walking back to my house and my older brother was in front of me. Now, my older brother is only 11 months older than me, and I will even say that there are a lot of times in our growing up, people thought we were twins because we were similar in size and in age. On this particular day, we and one of the other neighborhood kids found some old wood and were fashioning a tree house in an apple tree that was a little up the road from where our houses were. The sun was going down, and it was time for all of us to go home. We got down from the treehouse. Oh, and I want to say this, of course, we didn't have cell phones or any of that sort of thing, so this is how we entertained ourselves back in the day. So we got down from the treehouse, and we were walking in the field when I tripped on something. I don't remember what it was, but I tripped. I happened to be holding the hammer we were using to nail the boards into the tree, and the hammer slipped out of my hand. My brother was right in front of me, and since he was so close to me, I didn't have time to warn him. The front of the hammer caught him in the back of the head, and of course he immediately started crying, saying something about I did it on purpose, and ran the rest of the way home. I tried telling him that it slipped out of my hand, but when you're that young, logical explanations tend not to go very far. So I stood there in the field wondering if I should just run away somewhere when I heard my mother's voice yelling for me to come in. I tearfully told my parents it was an accident, and while they seemed to understand that I did not intentionally try to brain my brother, I still had to do a week's worth of dishes anyway. I did tell them, and I did them without much complaint because I felt bad about what had happened. Even though it was an accident, I still had to find a way to get back in a right relation with my parents and my older brother. Unless you live on an island somewhere and never see another human being, chances are conflict will arise if you have more than one person in a room. It's part of our human condition. Now, it's not really a question of if, but when, and what matters then is how the conflict is handled. And when I go back to the reading that I read to you all a few moments ago, for context, Nadab and Abihu were the sons of Aaron, who was Moses' brother. The sin that Nadab and Abihu did was to bring a fire of their own instead of the fire that was in a bronze altar that was around the Ark of the Covenant. And I want to say, if you're a fan of Indiana Jones, you realize that anything dealing with the Ark of the Covenant, you're setting yourself up for trouble. Now, and there's no evidence that Nadab and Abihu's faces were melted off, but they were smited by God anyway, because only God can bring the fire and not mere mortals. God saw that they were trying to be godlike, or at least God felt that that's how they were acting, and they paid the price. Now, to get back into right relation with God, the people weren't allowed to mourn the two of them. They were basically carried and kind of tossed aside outside the camp. Now, you think these two, who are the nephews of Moses, might have helped them get out of trouble, but the God of Levitcus plays no favorites. When it comes time for this congregation to begin working on a congregational covenant, the penalties will not be that severe. I want to point that out. Now, a simple definition of what a covenant is that it is an agreement between two parties. Now, most of the time this word carries legal meaning, but doing covenant work in a Unitarian Universalist setting isn't meant to be legalistic. It's meant to define the terms of how we interact with each other. Unitarian Universalism at its core is a covenantal religion, guided by 7, hopefully soon to be 8, principles, and there's 6 sources that they're based on. These principles help guide us to lead the kind of life that speak to our liberal values of fighting oppression, bigotry, and discrimination. And if we know how to act with each other, then we can better focus on the problems that our world is facing. Now, I won't review all the details of how a congregation goes about creating a covenant, but I will say this. The more people who are involved in its creation, the more voices that are heard, the covenant can become a living, breathing document that can guide the people or the groups that have been harmed back into right relation with each other. The biggest part of the process is figuring out how to make up for the harm that was done. So this brought to my mind the word of atonement. The dictionary tells us that atonement in a religious context is a reparation for having committed a sin against each other, against another person, or against God. So let's look at another question that has vexed theologians for centuries, and that is, what is sin? What is the nature of sin? That's an easy question to contemplate, isn't it? Now, the flip answer would be to paraphrase Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart from 1964, where he famously stated that he might not be able to define obscenity, but he knows what it is when he sees it. To put the idea of sin into some kind of context, and this is kind of based on a sermon I did a few years ago, I contacted a Reformed Jewish rabbi. And on the subject of sin, she mentioned that there are varying degrees of it, but the one that gets talked about the most is the term chait. And I hope I said that right. She told me that the term roughly translates to missing the mark. In this case, when one sins, they have missed the mark somehow, either with their God or with another person. Now, from what I gleaned from this conversation with this rabbi is that in the Jewish faith, in the month leading up to Rosh Hashanah, one prepares oneself for the time of repentance in the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. This kind of preparation is mentioned many times in the Hebrew Bible. And, of course, I just mentioned what Moses and Aaron had to do to get back into right relation with the God of their understanding. The rabbi even broke down the word atonement and said that you can break this word down into 3 parts, at one meant, meaning that once atonement is reached, you are at one with God, or at one with the other person, or at one with yourself. Now, having said all of this, I'm guessing many of you are thinking, well, that's just hunky-dory, Rev Kev, but what does this mean if I'm a humanist, atheist, non-theist, pagan, or somewhere in between, and I don't believe in God? Well, our 4th principle states that we believe in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Former UU President Bill Singford advised all UUs to come up with an elevator speech in an effort to find a quick and least word-salady way to describe Unitarian Universalism to those who are unaware of our faith, as I talked about that last week. Part of my speech would be to talk about how there are many paths to the divine. I also believe that there are many paths to at one meant. Are you at one with nature, with Gaia, with Buddha, or sitting in the center field bleachers at Comerica Park on a sunny afternoon? Wherever the case may be for you to find your way to at one meant, whenever you miss the mark, the key is to find your way back to that. Even if there is no higher power in your life, it's also a way to come back into right relation with yourself. The beauty of being in beloved community is that you don't have to do this alone. One of the last things the rabbi and I talked about was that she told me that in the service that takes place on Yom Kippur, there is a group prayer that is said by the people in the congregation where everyone in the building pledges to help each other repent. Repenting is not just a solo act. In our tradition and in this congregation, there are many ways to find your way back to the center or even back to right relation. Even without a covenant in place, this congregation has a right relations team so that when somebody does miss the mark, or if there is a group dedicated to helping both parties to find a way back. But with a covenant in place, this is a way to let everybody know what the rules are, so that way there's no mystery as to how to come back into the fold once harm has been done. Once your settled minister is in place, a covenant should be written between that minister and your retired minister so that everyone in this congregation knows how those two individuals will interact with each other. That settled minister will also want a covenant with the staff and with the board so that way everyone understands what the expectations are. And you all will probably have to covenant with Kimmy so that way the congregation and the board will have a better understanding of what the expectations of your minister emeritus is as well and what that status means to you all. This is something that every teacher learns before setting foot in a classroom. And Bethany, I'm glad you're watching because you know this. If the expectations are not set from the very first day of school, then that teacher is going to have a very long year and more gray hair added to their heads and probably some gastrointestinal trouble as well. I used to teach 7th graders, that's all I'm going to say. When everyone knows the rules and expectations, life just gets simpler. A macro way that our faith as a whole tries to come back to at one meant is through acts of social justice, be it through actions of immediate witness, changing the way the UUA invests its money, or like what happened in Arizona in 2012 with what became known as Justice General Assembly. I don't know if any of you went. Apparently it was a life-altering thing that happened. Because what happened at that GA, there was direct action that took place against all of the immigration things that were happening down there at the time. This is what attracted me to UUism over 20 years ago. The fact that we are out there. We're not just talking about doing something, but actually doing it. That is our group prayer, creating a more just and sustainable world. Now, going back to that story I told about my brother in the beginning, even though both of us are middle-aged now, in fact, he just turned 50 in December, and as an aside, I joked with him that at least he'll turn 50 before I will, which of course for me will be this November. I sometimes get the feeling, I worried that maybe he hadn't quite forgiven me about literally dropping a hammer on him, but the last time I was in his presence this past October, I asked him if he remembered the incident, and he told me he didn't really remember. My hope is that he forgot not because I hit him in the head with a hammer and there's memory loss, but because he's moved on from what happened. Perhaps he even forgave me. May we all find our way to at one-ment and to forgive those who missed the mark against us. Our closing hymn today is number 1019, Everything Possible, and I will say this hymn means something to me, as both at both of our children's naming ceremonies, we had this featured prominently in that service. So take it away. Thank you all. That sounded absolutely beautiful. Thank you. Our closing words today are from the Reverend Krista Taves, and she says, "It is our work shared with each other in covenant that creates and sustains this beloved community. We extinguish this chalice, but the light lives on in the directions we have chosen today. The light of this faith lives on in us, together in our hearts, minds, bodies, and spirit. Amen, and blessed be."